I'm kind of excited about this one. I've seen Texas in person, right? Followed them closely this season. Have watched Clemson less times, obviously, than Texas as an SEC girl here. But this seems like kind of a cakewalk for Texas, right? Or at least on paper, it should be.
Texas to me is much more complete. They're much more talented. They've recruited better, and they're at home,
Yeah.
right? And so I think so. But what's tough to me on this one, and I want to get your perception on this.
Okay.
What's tough to me on this one is Texas lost the only two games that they really played like. I guess Texas A&M's like good. I guess 7-5. I don't know. They're right on the verge of like average to good, right? So I don't know. I don't know really how to call Texas A&M, but Texas lost the only two like good games they played this year, or good
Good.
opponents. We
Same.
talked about this before. What did they play, like 5 of the 7 bottom
Yeah.
SEC teams? They got a Florida team that was red hot, but coming in with a third string quarterback, and
Yeah.
they played well in that game. But again, I think Florida was kind of dead on arrival with
They-
Lagway being out, and so I don't know how much how much credit do I give Texas for that? What happened to Florida's defense that game? I don't know, but like I don't know how to. So because of that, I don't really know. I know Texas has the talent.
Yeah.
But when they've played really good teams, like they have, like even A&M, they won by 10,
Yeah.
and
Well,
they
I mean,
and so like
that
I
also
just
is a rivalry game with a lot going around it. It hadn't been played in over a decade. There's a lot of storylines going into
but
that. And I mean, you're right, right? The only game that has really mattered, I guess, and they've gotten to play it twice. They have not been able to win either time, and obviously that's against Georgia. I think Texas is really well rounded. I think they're a really good team. Having seen them, so I've watched Florida in person all season, right? I didn't travel to every away game. I did travel to Austin, and it's interesting because I know that Florida's defense is much improved. Didn't look like it against Texas. Now, take the offense out of there, playing with the third string quarterback against a very good defense on the road is, that was not a going to be a situation where it was going to play out well for Florida. But Florida's defense couldn't do anything either, which I found interesting. They did have some injuries in the secondary, but I don't know. This just seemed like a really well-rounded, really talented team. I do always find it interesting when head coaches are the offensive coordinator. I think that more often than not, it doesn't work. And I do wonder if that's part of what we saw in that overtime loss to Georgia, was Sark kind of coach himself out of it. I think Georgia is the best coach team in college football currently. I don't know that I think they have the best roster today, but they have a top 3 roster. And if you have the best coach and you have a top 3 roster, you're probably the best team in college football. I don't know how many times you have to beat Texas to prove that. Apparently, it
3.
could end up being 3 times,
Yeah.
But in this, I think Texas is a really, really, really good team. And I think that this spread is accurate.
Yeah, I think 10.5, 11 is about accurate. Like this could certainly, Texas is talented enough to where this could turn into a bloodbath. There's no doubt about it. Clemson against good teams, you talk about Texas struggling against good teams. I don't think Clemson's been very good against good teams.
Yeah.
Outside of the SMU game, they've lost everything. They lost to Georgia. They lost to Louisville. They lost to South Carolina. They've just not been great. Shoot, they even let Florida State hang around and be respectable, right? When they went to Tallahassee. And that was Brock Glenn's first game. And so, yeah, I that's the other thing too, is like, does Clemson play up? Do they play well? Because if they don't, this will get ugly. To me, it's also not just the losses to Georgia. They beat Vandy by 3. And I know Vandy was better than they normally are this year. I'm not, but it's still Vandy, right? Like they still beat Vandy by 3. They were very close with Mississippi State in the second half and then scored one late to kind of put it away. They beat Arkansas by 10. They beat Arkansas 20-10. So their defense was really good. Offense couldn't get it rolling. And so even in some of their wins against not very good competition, they were just okay, right? Like they're not blowing teams out. And so that's where I think like Clemson will hang around in this thing. But they'll need some Texas mistakes, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Clemson could just win. I don't think Clemson could just play better. they'll need some mistakes. And Quinn Ewers, I mean, to be very fair, has shown a propensity to make some pretty bad mistakes. And
Yeah.
they've been really bad in the red zone. They were really bad in the red zone at the end of the SEC championship. Obviously, Georgia's defense is different than Clemson's. They were really bad in the red zone in the overtime. And so to me, if I actually like, I like the, I actually like Klubnik in the Klubnik Ewers matchup, but I like Texas because they can throw Arch Manning in at any time and kind of give a change
Right.
of pace. So quarterback room, I would go with Texas. Head
Sure.
to head starters, I'd probably lean Clemson. But again, like we talked about with Indiana Notre Dame, I don't know that just your starting quarterback being better accounts for the other 21 guys that I
Sure.
like more for
Well,
Texas.
not if all things aren't equal, which
Right.
I don't think they are. Do you think that all of the pressure is on Texas? Clemson, 2 days before probably didn't think they had a chance to get in, right? I mean, some things had to happen. They got in by the skin of their teeth. Um, they're playing with house money at this point, right? But for Texas, they spend 12 months out of the year telling us they're the best thing since sliced bread. They're feeling it.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how much that pressure matters or not, because you could say that about every favorite, but I do think they are the team with pressure, especially losing both games to Georgia, losing in the SEC championship. You had all these expectations. You, in all honesty, blew the game in the, like, there's no reason they should have lost that game, especially once the backup came in. You had a perfectly called fake punt against you. You stunk in the red zone at the end of the regular. I mean, the game shouldn't even have gone to overtime once they got the ball down to the 12 with 30 seconds left or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, Clemson has no pressure on them. And so I do think that'll help them some to just kind of play loose and like, hey man, nobody thinks we should be here. We probably don't deserve to be here. We kind of got lucky to get here, not only to get in the ACC championship, but also to win it on that long field goal with all their field goal struggles. I think they've had more kicks blocked than any other team in the country by like double. And so for them to make a 56 yarder, you're just like rolling your eyes and you're saying, of course, that's how they won.
Right. Right.
So yeah, 100% house money with Clemson. But I mean, how much does that matter? Like
Yeah.
there's pressure, but when you're still 10, 11, 12 points better than somebody else, I mean, does the pressure, I mean, that's not like an insane spread. This isn't App State, Michigan by any means. Like, we're
Right.
not going to be, oh my gosh, can you believe, like, yeah, I don't expect Clemson to win, but this isn't like the most shocking upset of the year by any means if they do. So yeah, how much does that pressure matter? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on the personality of your locker room and your team. Is that something that they are easily influenced by? We've seen teams that, play tight because of the pressure. And, we've seen teams that thrive because of that. I think Alabama teams thrive when, at least Saban coached Alabama teams, when all of the pressure and the spotlight are on them. I think we've seen teams collapse, because of it. But I think Texas has probably a been there, done that attitude. I know they're excited. This game is at home. Something that I find interesting, you mentioned that you think that playing in Happy Valley, playing, at Notre Dame are big home field advantages. Do you think this is less so? And is that mainly weather related? It'll be pretty mild in Austin, or is it something else?
It's funny that you asked this because I was going to ask you this, and so like I'm going to make you answer your own question. How big? And okay, so the game got out of hand early, so that does impact things and
Yeah.
the excite. But like, how did you feel at the start of that game? And Texas also knew they were playing a third string quarterback, a team that had at that point 4 or 5 wins, like 6 wins maybe. Like I don't know, I don't know how jacked up Texas was for it anyway. But like, how did you feel in that stadium
So
pregame compared to other SEC stadiums you've been to?
first of all, the venue is incredibly impressive. Austin is a fun city. The tailgating atmosphere was great, but it was absolutely not the same as going into Death Valley or, Florida, Georgia, and Jacksonville, or, Columbia at night, or,
More like wine and cheese, like NFL type crowd or what?
no, I just think not particularly loud, but they were playing a team that they knew was starting their third string quarterback. And so I think that potentially had something to do with it. I mean, DJ Lagway starting that game, maybe it feels different. I don't know. There was never a point in time where I felt like it was particularly loud, except for the fact that they shoot these cannons off like literally at field level when anybody does anything, it felt like. And we kept trying to figure out like how that's not banned, and I don't know if it's like the cowbells in Mississippi State and it's grandfathered in, but like that was wild. But outside of that, there was nothing. I don't know. It was not a typical SEC game atmosphere to me. But the caveat is they were playing a team they knew they were going to beat.
Right.
So
Like, how hyped is the Swamp when USF comes to town,
right.
right?
And
Like,
that's what, and so I'm trying to be, fair about it from that perspective. But I did expect with the size of that thing that it would have been a louder game.
So that considered, that said,
Mhm.
I think Penn State is the home field, the biggest home
Oh,
field
yeah.
advantage of the four. I would probably put Ohio State next,
Mhm.
and then I would put Indiana. Weather,
Notre
fan base, all of those things. Because to me, yeah, the closeness of the games, where the mood of the fans are, right?
Yeah.
Like for Texas, you just blew, and I'm sure everyone's happy. All 12 teams are happy to be in
Happy to
this
be in the
thing,
playoffs.
right?
Sure.
But Texas, Notre Dame, they blew through the rest of their schedule. They get a home game, and that's what they want. Texas probably feels like they should have a bye right now. They probably feel like, man, we're having to play, and not
They
only
should
are
have
we
a bye.
having
Yeah.
to, not only are we having to play a team that is not, I wouldn't call Clemson a great team by any means. They're a good team, but a team that has a crap ton of talent. Like we were all thinking like, oh, the 5 seeds where you want to be. That's going to play the
Yeah.
group of 5 team. Now they got to play Clemson. And again, I'm not trying to hype Clemson up too much, but I'd much rather play Boise State than Clemson this weekend if I'm Texas, just
Yeah.
because of the recruiting and the talent that's on that team. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like I think all things considered, this is the home field advantage that probably means the least. Texas fans will hate hearing that, but I think that has a lot to do with who else is everywhere else. Like if this game, if you had a home game in I don't know, I'm not even gonna try and think through who the other games are or whatever, but yeah, this is probably the home field that means the least. However, if this game was somehow Ohio State at Texas
That
or
would feel different,
that
probably.
would probably feel different, but still, like nothing would beat Penn State this weekend, and not much would probably beat Ohio State this weekend either. So I don't know. I think that it is the home field advantage that means the least of the 4.
Do you think Texas feels like they have something to prove and are potentially motivated by that overtime loss to Georgia?
Yeah, I think it can go one of two ways, and so I would lean that way. But the other side of the coin of that is all of that pressure that you talked about earlier is on them because
Yeah.
they lost that game. And there's no like mulligan in this. Like, the same pressure is on everybody to win or go home. But yeah, I think that probably the answer is that they're motivated to like prove that wasn't them, like that they're better than what they showed in
Yeah.
that second half of that game. But the other side of it is, what if Clemson does take an early lead in this thing? What if they do start well like they started against SMU? Does some of that doubt creep in from, man, we're going to blow this again, just like we blew
Right.
the Georgia game both times? Like, can we get back into this? Are we one-dimensional? Do we have to go to Arch because Quinn's struggling? Like, yeah, so as much as I do think that is the end, like you're right, like it is the motivation to prove everyone wrong. If that's what you're counting on, that can flip very quickly in college football, and we've seen that. Now, I actually don't think it does. I think Texas wins and probably wins going away, but I think it could go either way. So I'll lean that way though, the way you talked about being motivated to kind of prove everything wrong.
I think it kind of depends on what your locker room leadership looks like, right? And what you know, if you've got a good group of older guys, then it's food, right? It's motivation. You want to go and prove everybody wrong. But if you are young and if you are, you got to believe in yourself. You got to kind of have an ego to sit at the top of the college football world, right? And so if you allow those doubts to creep in, that is really, really hard to overcome. And so, I mean, we'll see when kickoff happens, but it is definitely going to be, something that's ever present, kind of hanging in the air for Texas, I think.
Thank you guys so much for watching a peek inside the SEC. We did a live show on Wednesday night where we predicted not only this game, but all of the college football playoff round 1 games. You can click the video on the screen right now to see that in its entirety and see all of the predictions that we made. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll talk to you soon here on a peek inside SEC football.